Hold up. Hold up.
Pas tapé.
Up.
C'est pas vrai.
Hold up.
How was it possible that a wide-body aircraft could go missing flying across the Atlantic Ocean with both engines running for 2 whole years? Stay tuned until the end to hear the shocking thing that happened to all the passengers on board. The year was 2009, June 2009. The flight was scheduled from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil to Paris, France. As the flight time duration was 12 hours and 45 minutes, there were 3 pilots involved. This is so that the pilots can take turns to rest. The 3 pilots consists of 1 captain and 2 first officers. The captain was 58 years old with 11,000 hours under his belt, with 1,700 hours on the A330. The first officer was 32 years old with 3,000 flight hours and 800 hours on the A330. The relief first officer was 37 years old with 6,500 flight hours with 4,500 hours on the A330. As the flight is crossing the equator, the plane will be crossing a zone called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, known as the ITCZ. Over here, wind from the north and south will meet each other. This forces humid air upwards towards the sky and cause huge cloud formation. These clouds are dangerous and should be avoided. Sometimes the water droplets are small and is hard to detect using the weather radar. First of all, how does an aircraft measure airspeed? In the front of the aircraft, there are pointy things called pitot probes. These probes are instrumental in calculating the airspeed of the aircraft. The problem with these pitot probes was that it was susceptible to ice crystals clogging up the holes. Airbus then issued a maintenance bulletin to all airlines to change to a newer pitot probes. The aircraft that they were using was scheduled to have its pitot probes changed after landing in Paris, France. At 22:29 UTC, the aircraft that consisted of 216 passengers and 12 crew members lifted off and started their climb away from Rio de Janeiro. During the climb, the relief first officer left the cockpit to rest in the cabin. His scheduled rest lasted for about 3 hours. At 01:46 UTC, the aircraft entered into a cloud layer, and shortly after that, St. Elmo's fire was visible on the windscreen. St. Elmo's fire are electrostatic discharge which are normally present during thunderstorms. This happens when there is a high voltage differential between the air and the aeroplane. It is a sign that the plane is surrounded by clouds. The captain then decided to take his rest and called for the relief pilot to substitute him, kind of like a football match where another player goes out and replaces his teammate. The relief pilot sat on the left and is the pilot monitoring. The captain then left the cockpit to take his break. According to the cockpit voice recorder, it would seem that both pilots are pretty tired. The first officer then told the cabin crew that they might be expecting some turbulence. At 02:10 UTC, the autopilot and autothrust disconnected. At the same time, the aircraft started banking sharply to the right. The first officer shouted,
I have control.
As the aircraft continued banking right, the indicated airspeed on the captain's primary flight display and the standby indicator suddenly dropped from 275 knots to 60 knots. Because of this lower erroneous speed, the altimeter system shows the aircraft was at 300 feet lower than it was and a negative vertical speed. The first officer reacted by using his side stick to turn left and pitch up. This started a chain of events that will soon destroy the aircraft.
Before we continue, do toggle the like button and subscribe. If you want to see more of this, do let us know in the comments below. Thank you very much, and I will love you a very, 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 very long time.
The aircraft now reverted to alternate law. To know what this is, do check out this video here. In essence, the flight controls are more sensitive in alternate law. The first officer started overcorrecting, turning right and then left and then back again. 11 seconds after the autopilot disconnected, the aircraft pitch has reached 11 degrees nose up and the first officer was still turning max left and max right on the side stick. There were about 10 ECAM messages showing up and it is very noisy in the cockpit as the master warning and master caution sounded. This created a very stressful environment for the pilots. Because of the full backside stick, the aircraft is now climbing at 6,900 feet per minute, which is 7 times higher than what it should be. The possible reason the first officer was pitching up was because he did not perform the memory item of turning off the flight directors, after experiencing unreliable airspeed. This unreliable speed indication was caused by the icing that accumulated in the pitot probes. The relief pilot prompted the first officer to pitch down. A few seconds later, as the aircraft was passing 37,000 feet, which is their maximum altitude, the ice started to melt. The airspeed indications came back, showing a speed of 223 knots. The relief pilot called the captain at the back in order for him to return to the cockpit. He also turned the attitude heading and air data selector to first officer on 3 on the pedestal. This was not part of the ECAM actions. 3 seconds later, the stall warning sounded and lasted for about 1 minute. What the first officer did next was shocking. Instead of lowering the nose down, he pitched up to 16 degrees nose up. This made the stabilizer at the back move to max nose up position. The aircraft started buffeting violently, indicating a stall. The first officer added full toga thrust. 1 minute after the first unreliable indication, the ice completely cleared up on the pitot tubes. The airspeed indicator started working again. The speed was at 183 knots and now the aircraft was descending rapidly. At this time the relief pilot decided to take over controls and pressed the takeover button but never verbalized it. The first officer took back over controls again. At this time the aircraft was descending at 10,000 feet per minute and angle of attack was close to 40 degrees up. Because of this high angle of attack, the air that was hitting the pitot probes and static ports caused the pressure to be the same. Once again the speed indication disappears as the computer is unable to calculate under those extreme conditions. As the speed reaches 30 knots, the stall warning was silenced and the captain came into the cockpit. The captain was greeted with severe buffeting, multiple ECAM warnings and a high rate of descent. As the nose started pitching down, the airspeed started increasing and the stall warning came back up. This was because now there is a valid speed indication that the computer can calculate. This is very confusing for the pilots. When they pitched down, the stall warning came on. When they pitch up, the stall warning disappeared. The first officer might be thinking he was overspeeding and decided to use the speed brakes. The other pilots told him to stow it. By now all 3 pilots are very confused at what was happening. Passing 10,000 feet, the relief pilot took over controls but the first officer was still using his side stick. As the relief pilot was pitching down, the first officer was pitching up, so both actions cancel each other out. The captain suddenly realized that the first officer has been pitching up all these while. He kept shouting and saying that they were pitching up. But then the relief pilot changed his mind and decided to pitch up as they were fast approaching the ocean. The aircraft now is falling vertically at a speed of more than 100 knots. The EGPWS pull-up and stall warning was sounding and then the first officer pressed the takeover push button and pitched full up. At 0240 UTC, the aircraft crashed into the Atlantic Ocean at a descent rate of 10,900 feet per minute. All 228 people died instantly. The force that they were experiencing on their bodies was equivalent to jumping off the 50th floor of a building. Because of the crash that happened in the middle of the ocean, it took authorities 2 years to find the wreckage. When the final report came out based on the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, they concluded that it was the ice crystals formed on the pitot tubes that cause unreliable speed. This led to a series of confusing actions done by the pilots which led to a stall. This led to a revamp on pilot training which now includes Jet Upset Recovery Procedures, or UPRT for short. Further emphasis on stall recovery was also introduced in the training.
Once again, thank you very much for watching. Please comment and subscribe. I appreciate you. Take good care of yourselves and I will see you in the next video.